Worship Associate today. Please stand as you are willing and able and join us in singing number 1060 in this teal hymnal as we sing of hope and joy.
Okay, wait a minute. Good morning. My name is Linda Carayannis, and I am a member of the Board of Trustees. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Hudson Valley. Whether you have been with this congregation a decade or more, or this is your first time visiting, we welcome you. Whatever the faith and traditions of your past, we welcome you. Whatever your theological stance, we welcome you. Whoever you are and whomever you love, we welcome you. Whatever your heritage, we welcome you. We respectfully acknowledge the territory on which our church building sits as the ancestral homeland of the Munsee, Lenape, and Wappinger people. I have some announcements here. These are from the FUSW. Please check the website FUSW.org and Facebook page for the latest about the Sunday services and other events. Upcoming worship, Sunday, July 17th, 10 a.m., but you got to have friends. Betsy, Cates, and friends. Joys and sorrows, we ask that you send your joys and sorrows to Ann Pearl no later than 8 p.m. the night before the service. More information can be found in the scoop. From the Future Committee. This month, the Future Committee will hold a series of inline small group meetings to gather information from the congregation to help us plan for the future of FUSW and decide how we wish to move forward in our post-flood era. We encourage all congregants to take part in these meetings. Dates and times are listed in the scoop. To allow everyone to consider their answers, we are sharing our questions in advance. Please contact Craig Butler. Tickets are available for a Broadway show on that day in Amsterdam on Saturday, July 30th. Please contact Sarita Roy, and that information is in the scoop. UU Reproductive Rights. Community UU in White Plains has started a reproductive rights social justice team and invites all Westchester UUs to participate. Contact information can be found in the scoop. Lastly, please remember that the Board of Trustees usually meets the third Tuesday of each month at 7:30 online. You're welcome to join us. Not here. Please look for a link in the scoop. For the most up-to-date information, please refer to our weekly newsletter and check our website frequently. The website is also the place where you can find contact information for our staff, Board of Trustees, and other congressional leaders. And please join us for conversation after the service. If you are present in this sanctuary, feel free to stay right here. If the weather permits, you can join us outside. And here, if you're watching the live stream, the link for a Zoom coffee hour can be found in the Saturday reminder in your email and on our website. If you're just recently joining us and would like to receive our weekly e-news, please email us with your name, and we will make sure you're added to our e-news list. We can also answer any questions you might have. Email us at uucroton@gmail.com or fill out one of the yellow cards in the back of the pews and just drop it in the collection plate. Please silence your phones at this time, and once again, we welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Hudson Valley.
It is my great pleasure to introduce our guest preacher today, Lily Carayannis. Yes, thank you. Holds a Master of Divinity from Union Theological Seminary and a Master's of Philosophy from SUNY Stony Brook. She is a member of the Board of Trustees for UU Faith Action New Jersey, and she is the Deputy Chief of Special Operations at the New York City Civilian Complaint Review Board, a city agency that investigates allegations of police misconduct. Lily's ministry stands at the intersection of ecological justice, trans rights, and racial justice. She believes that the crisis which faces America and the world can only be addressed by a steadfast dedication to the demands of justice, the power of love in action, and an investment in our spiritual lives. Welcome, Lily.
Thank you. And thank you for welcoming me to this loving community and talented community I've learned this morning. Our opening words are from Ursula K. Le Guin's translation of the Tao Te Ching, returning to the root. Be completely empty. Be perfectly serene. The 10,000 things arise together. In their arising is their return. Now they flower, and flowering sink homeward, returning to the root. The return to the root is peace. Peace, to accept what must be, to know what endures. In that knowledge is wisdom. Without it, ruin, disorder. To know what endures is to be open-hearted, magnanimous, regal, blessed, following the Tao, the way that endures forever. The body comes to its end, but there is nothing to fear.
It is not by chance that you arrived here today. You have been looking for something larger than yourself. Inside of you, there is a yearning, a calling, a hope for more, a desire for a place of belonging and caring. Through your struggles, someone nurtured you into being, instilling a belief in a shared purpose, a common yet precious resource that belongs to all of us when we share. And so you began seeking a beloved community, a people that does not put fences around love, a community that holds its arms open to possibilities of love, a heart home to nourish your soul and share your gifts. Welcome home. Welcome to worship. Now, please join me in saying our unison affirmation. The words are in your order of service. Inspired by love, our mission is to seek our true nature, connect deeply and openly, and act for justice. Okay, let us now bear witness to the joys and sorrows experienced in our community. If you have a brief yet personally significant joy or sorrow that you are willing to share, please come up to the microphone and speak loudly so that everyone, including the people watching at home, can hear you. If you would prefer to only have a candle lit without speaking, please just stand and I will light it for you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joanne. This is a joy. After attending here for 4 years, I became a member a couple of weeks ago. I'm very
Hi, I'm Ginny Stillman, and I think last week or the week before I mentioned a joy. I have a joy and a sorrow. My family from Montana arrived a little over a week ago, spent a couple of days with us, and then went down to North Carolina to be with other family members. And of course, you know, one of my grandchildren developed COVID, and now my son, who's the jazz saxophonist and has lots of gigs lined up this coming week, is very sick, and we're waiting to hear, you know, momentarily whether his rapid PCR test is positive or negative, but all of his symptoms would suggest that he's got COVID too, and they're supposed to spend the week with us in our apartment. So everything is a huge conundrum, and so it's a joy that they're here, but then I won't really be able to spend the time with them that I had hoped for. So, c'est la vie.
I would like to read from a member from FUSW who sent us one, Tilda Virgilio. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, Tilda. There is a deep sorrow to share for my 40-year-old nephew who has stage 4 incurable, inoperable digestive cancer. So young and so much of a struggle. There is a joy for my daughter Carla, who is here to help me on my journey with cancer, and a joy for my daughter Annette, who will be setting time aside for my grandkids and I to have some online playtime during this time of healing. Even though they are in New Hampshire and not able to travel at this time, we will be having some quality time regardless. We also acknowledge all the unspoken joys and sorrows held within the sanctuary of our hearts, and all those people who have yet to find a spiritual home where they can share their joys and sorrows.
So I invite you now into a time of meditation. Every Sunday, we take time to sit in the quiet with each other, recognizing how hard this quiet is to find. We take time to breathe deeply. We take time to hear the calm rhythm of our hearts. And in this quiet, we open ourselves to new truths, recommit ourselves to the important work of justice, and reflect on those who have loved us into being. So I invite you into that quiet now. Breathe deeply. Inhale through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. If you are sitting, feel the chair beneath you, and feel any place of tension, and try to relax those muscles. This morning we breathe deeply, aware of the persistent anxiety of everyone we interact with in these uncertain times. We are grateful to those on whom we can count to get us through each day. A family member or a friend to whom we can confess our anxieties and who will love us in that angst. And today, as we talk about stressful things, about the end of things, it is right that we take a moment and recognize the beginnings of things. The end of things helps us think of those we love and those who loved us into being. And today, Fred Rogers, better known as Mr. Rogers, will be our guide. So I encourage you to close your eyes if it feels safe. All of us have special ones who have loved us into being. And would you just take, along with me, 1 minute to think of those who have helped you become who you are, those who have cared about you and wanted what was best for you in life. I will keep the time. Whomever you've been thinking about, how pleased they must be to know the difference you feel they've made. May we find the time each day to breathe deeply and to commit ourselves to these virtues.
Freedom. Let there be a little country without many people. Let them have tools that do the work of 10 or 100 and never use them. Let them be mindful of death and disinclined to long journeys. They'd have ships and carriages, but no place to go. They'd have armor and weapons, but no parades. Instead of riding, they might go back to using knotted cords. They'd enjoy eating, take pleasure in clothes, be happy with their houses, devoted to their customs. The next little country might be so close the people could hear cocks crowing and dogs barking there, but they'd get old and die without ever having been there. Please join me now in singing hymn number 219, "O Hear My People." Please rise as you are willing and able.
fiction novel by a Chinese novelist named Kai-Shin Liu called The Three-Body Problem. And in this book, an alien civilization has discovered Earth. And that civilization is able to disrupt things here on Earth from a great distance because it has a superior understanding of physics. And so its first task is to disrupt the world's population from advancing in physics and chemistry, effectively neutralizing our ability to make weapons or advance a challenge to the threat that the aliens pose. Now, the alien planet is constitutionally less stable than the Earth and thus less desirable to sustain life, and so these aliens set out to take over the Earth. The only thing is that the alien civilization is 450 years away from reaching Earth, and the inhabitants of Earth know that they're coming. And so they're forced to make a decision. Do we attempt to pour all of our resources into trying to overcome the technological shield placed on us by the aliens? Do we try something clever, or do we try to outwit them? Or do we just leave it for the next generation to figure out? I mean, 450 years is a long time. 450 years ago, the French were fighting the wars of religion between the Catholics and the Protestants. Pennsylvania wasn't even a concept, and the internal combustion engine was still 300 years away from existence. Now, this book and this concept seemed like a good metaphor for the climate apocalypse facing the world. It's a huge, complex problem, and its consequences seem kind of distant or hard to believe. And I remember when I first kind of heard about the climate apocalypse, and it was the 2006 film, An Inconvenient Truth, and I grew up in rural Colorado, and so I was fairly familiar with people talking about the end of the world. There were those who were, stockpiling guns and goods in preparation for the pending collapse of civilization, and there were those who were the Christian apocalypsists, holding their breath, waiting for the second coming, and hoping that God's anger would rain down upon their enemies. I was used to the portrayals of the end of the world in popular media and in film, and it was in this context, that I saw this film, and it was strange to hear someone talking about the danger not from the point of view of a religion I didn't believe in, whether that be guns and individualism or Christian salvation. And it was strange to hear science and rationalism back up these claims. But the movie failed to, and I know I'm not alone in this, judging by the actions of many of us since, the movie really failed to move me toward meaningful action. And I think there are many reasons for this, but today I want to focus on one of these that I think is most vital. And it's a complicated topic, but I want to focus in on the roots of our spiritual lives. Regardless of our cosmology for those of us who don't believe in a God, or our theology for those of us who do, we all have spiritual lives. And insofar as we think of this idea of a spiritual life as the underlying beliefs and experiences that kind of inform what is meaningful to us. And so I do want to talk broadly just about two general approaches in our spiritual lives to history, the future, and civilization. The first I will call the providential view, or a providential world. This is an underlying belief that the world is human-centered, that the world cares about our well-being, and in some iterations that we will ultimately be saved or reunited with a God or a being or love. The second worldview is what I will call, following a theologian named William Connolly, tragic vision. And tragic vision places us in a precarious world, a world that's not centered on humans, a world that's not inherently good, and a world that does not necessarily lead to salvation or to wholeness. Tragic vision rejects human-centeredness, and it rejects providence. It's tragic in that way of a Greek tragedy, where the gods are in their own petty fights and we are left here to fend for ourselves. And I bring these two visions up of the world in this conversation because when we talk of the end of the world, and I think that's what we're fundamentally talking about when we're talking about climate change. When we talk about the end of the world, we are ultimately talking about the beginning of the world. And we're ultimately talking about our fundamental beliefs about meaning making, and our role in it all. The word apocalypse is Greek, and it doesn't mean calamity, as we often think of it, but more so a revealing or an unveiling. Thus, the book of the Christian Bible, the Apocalypse of John, is properly translated into English, Revelation. That book, which gets a lot of airtime in what I call imperial Christianity, describes the end of the Roman Empire. The end of the world as we know it, reveals, uncovers, exposes the fractures of the world that is ending. So in Revelation, it primarily reveals the oppressive and monstrous nature of Rome. The climate apocalypse is the revelation of our time. How we view it, how we see it, what it reveals to us is the fracture and fragility that have existed so long in our world. The climate apocalypse and its revelations tell us what is ultimately meaningful and what matters to us. And I emphasize this point because as UUs, we don't have baked into our faith an end of the world concept. Some forms of Christianity center their religion on it, on the second coming of Christ. And often the talk of the end of the world is tainted with the priorities of a certain type of Christianity and its vision of justice by the people hoping for the end of the world where their creed will be proven right. But they don't own the end of the world as we know it. We too must take theological ownership. So what does that mean for us UUs, that this may very well be the end of the world as we know it? That 450 years of waiting for the aliens has shrunk for us, and perhaps we have maybe 10 or 20 or 50 years before the climate apocalypse really opens its maw. And we're already experiencing some of it, right? And often when we feel this, we kind of get preoccupied. How can we stop it? How can we stop the climate apocalypse? But I want to put that aside for a minute. It's an important question to ask. But we have to ask ourselves at this point, prepare ourselves seriously, that regardless what we do, whether we stop the worst of climate change, whether we reverse it, or whether we succumb to the point of no return, no matter what, this is the end of the world as we know it. The things that would be required of us are so great that even if we win this fight against climate change, this world of ours with all of our particular expectations of a particular future is over. And so how do we meet this moment? What I have heard called the razor's edge of time. How do we meet this moment spiritually? Well, I believe that the tools of providence and progress are not fit for this moment in time. The end of the world that tells us that the divine is coming down and gathering up the best believers is one that not only rings hollow, but one that is ultimately and fundamentally about resentment. It is exactly what our universalist forebears fought against. Selective salvation is an extension of an unequal justice of today, but enacted at a cosmic level. Universalism's belief in universal salvation means that salvation is not a means to met out justice, but that justice work is left to humans. I also think that the belief that human history is one of progress towards greater justice and greater accomplishment ignores the very precarity of our world. I have had the same few weeks of the Supreme Court that you all have had. I've had the same 6 years as you all. I have mourned the 6th great extinction. Cosmologies that approach this apocalypse with eyes closed will be swallowed up in it. Resentment and despair threaten to surround us when we stare into this abyss. So how do we build a theology that doesn't sink into resentment and despair? A cosmology that calls us to embrace our neighbors, fight against the influence of empire, love more completely. There's a quote from the Jewish theologian Elie Wiesel that I keep coming back to, and I want to give some background. Wiesel lived through the Holocaust, and in this quote, he is reading the book of Job. And for those of us who don't remember that book, God makes a wager with a supernatural entity that Job will remain faithful even if all of the providential things that God has provided him are stripped away. So his family is killed, his property destroyed, his body is infected and covered in maggots, and Job cries out to God, "Why is this happening?" And God appears in a tornado and essentially chastises Job, and then goes through a litany of God's accomplishments. Yeah. It's a notoriously bad response to the question of evil. But Wiesel, reading that story and reading Job in the light of the apocalypse of the Holocaust, says, Job did not suffer in vain. Thanks to Job, we know that it is given to humans to transform divine injustice to human justice and compassion. It is given to us to transform divine injustice to human justice and compassion. This is tragic vision. It's an impatient vision, it's a prophetic vision, it's the vision of the oppressed. Tragic vision tells us that there is nothing at all that guarantees that justice will be the final result. Nothing at all that guarantees that humanity will be saved, nothing at all that keeps evil away, except us, except our actions, except our steadfast commitment to justice, to love, to grief. It is given to us to transform injustice or indifference into human justice and compassion. The providential world tells us that technology will save us, that history has been leading up to this moment of climate apocalypse, but so too have our clevernesses exceeded beyond any problem. Or, don't worry, God's driving this car. But the tragic worldview tells us that we're living on the razor's edge of time, and there is nothing guaranteed to save us. So many of our oppressed siblings know tragic vision. It's the vision that says that we can't wait for history to slowly lead us to the promised land. Our trans siblings are being embraced by cars. Our black siblings have been lynched for hundreds of years. The climate apocalypse reveals the thousands of apocalypses that have been happening every day under the foot of Capitol. The immigrants traveling to our shores because their very earth can no longer churn forth its resources. This is an apocalypse that's waiting for us. The visions of collapsing civilization simply expands the enterprise that has been crushing so many. The vision of human extinction is the reality of so many creatures on our planet today, from the apocalypse of the slaughterhouse to the indigenous bird, the last of its species, calling out for love at the end of her time. Tragic vision is the vision of the oppressed, the revelation of the reviled, who at once remind us that we are not that much different from people riding in the backs of trucks to our desert, not that far away from that condition ourselves, and that there is only us, me, myself, and all of us around us, who can call for any type of justice, and we don't have the luxury to wait for divine intervention. So, for SUUs, I believe that we do two things really well. I think that we grieve really well, and we do justice work really well. And what do I mean by this? A UU memorial service is powerful. Our memorial services are not a motor to evangelize, nor are they a motor to perpetuate a provincial worldview that assures everyone that that person is in God's loving hands now. Our memorial services don't rush from wounds to healing. These services focus on the individual. They reflect upon the meaning of their life, and we reflect upon the whole person in their beauty and in their struggles. The whole person, not what we wanted them to be, but who they were. If you have ever been to a UU memorial service, you know what I mean. And at the end of the world as we know it, this practice of grief is so vital. We have lost so much, and we're going to lose so much in the coming years. Grief ungrieved just feeds resentment. So we must grieve. We must grieve the loss of our animal kin. We must grieve the loss of nations, of strangers, of each other. This practicing of grieving is the work of justice at the end of the world. So too, I think our 8 principles are at their core founded on this tragic vision. Our dedication to clearly articulated principles, not an ancient book, not a way of believing, not a creed, but clearly articulated principles. These principles are guiding lights that help us keep the course, embrace community. And these principles open us up to intersectional collaboration with many non-religious and religious groups, because we can't do this work alone. Preserving our democratic structures, holding up the fundamental work of humanity in our search for truth and meaning, dismantling white supremacy, and fighting the logic of genocide by recognizing our interconnection and our worth and dignity. These are the fundamental values of a humanity striving to turn divine injustice into human justice and compassion. I think our principles not only hold in the face of the end of the world as we know it, they stand to hold the world up at the end of the world as we know it. So the reading that we had today was from the Tao Te Ching, and it's the closest thing that the Tao gets to describing a paradise. Ursula K. Le Guin comments in this chapter that Lao Tzu seems to be saying, enjoy your life. Live in your body. You are your body. Where else is there to go? Heaven and earth are one. As you walk the streets of your town, you walk on the way of heaven. So if we're not banking on that divine kingdom to solve all our problems at the end of the world, if our town, our cities, our earth are the only places we can go, then let us see their divinity. Let us make them divine. It's said that Martin Luther, the Protestant theologian, was planting an apple tree one day, and one of his students asked him, "What would you be doing if this was the end of the world?" And Martin Luther is said to have responded, "Even if it were the end of the world, I'd be planting my apple tree." May we see our streets as the way of heaven and our principles as our apple tree, worth planting in and of themselves. May it be so, and amen. Please join us in our next hymn, number 144, Now is the Time Approaching, and I invite you to stand as you're willing and able.
Each week, we make an offering from the bounty we are blessed to enjoy. We do this in a spirit of love and generosity, aware that we have benefited from those who have gone before, those who in their turn gave generously. Our offering goes to support the work of love and justice undertaken by this community. Today's offering will also be shared with the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. Please refer to our e-newsletter or website for more information on that. For this UUCHV congregation, you can make your donation in several ways. If present in the sanctuary, you may give cash or a check in the offering plate as it comes by. You may also scan the QR code in your order of service. From your homes, you can make your donation via credit card or PayPal using the links provided in the e-newsletter. Please remember to give a little extra to compensate for the 3% surcharge. Or if you prefer, you can always mail us a check. If you wish to support the FUSW, First Unitarian Society of Westchester, please see the website printed in the order of service, or you may go online to fusw.org and click on the donate button. The offering will now be given and gratefully received. Please join me in the dedication of the offering. The words are in your order of service. May these gifts and the work of our hands and hearts give power to all we stand for as a community of faith. And now please join me in extinguishing the chalice. The words are found in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
I forgot to print a benediction. So I will just say thank you all. Go in peace.